team.
Yes, I was.
And do you work?
I'm swear to testify that you all through the
Sir, if you would you tell everybody your name and spell your last name for the court reporter, please?
Sure. I'm Captain Robert Knapp, K-N-A-P-P.
And Captain Knapp, by whom were you employed?
The City of Massillon Fire Department.
And how long have you been employed in that capacity?
12 years.
What are your duties with the City of Massillon Fire Department?
I'm a captain, firefighter, and paramedic.
Were you working on December 31st of 2014?
Yes, I was.
And do you work 24-hour shifts?
I do.
During the course of that shift, were you dispatched to 1753 Oak Trail Street?
I was.
Is that located in the City of Massillon, Stark County, the state of Ohio?
Yes, it is.
When you received the dispatch to respond to that address, what was the nature of the call that brought you there?
I believe it came in as a shooting.
A shooting?
I believe.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to try to keep your voice up, Captain. You're kind of soft-spoken.
Sure, no problem.
What vehicle do you take to respond to that residence?
We took an ambulance.
And how many people were on that ambulance?
Normally we carry 3. We had 4 that evening.
So you and 3 others?
Yes.
Where is your station located in the City of Massillon?
We're at Erie and Tremont, right next to the post office.
So you had to go Erie to Lincoln Way and up Wales, probably?
That's correct. And then right on Hills and Dales, right on Ledgewood. Yes.
When you get to the vicinity of 1753 Oak Trail, are you able to pull into the driveway?
No. There were multiple police units on the street. We would park probably at least maybe 4 doors down, on a guess.
Okay. Do you exit the vehicle at that time?
I did.
And who goes with you?
I took firefighter Tharp and firefighter Weber with me, and the 4th guy, firefighter Podlager, remained at the truck to get the cot.
When you go into that residence, what kind of equipment do you take with you?
We took a heart monitor, and we took a med kit, which would have medications and equipment.
And as you approach the residence, can you tell me what you observe outside the residence?
Sure. There was several Massillon police officers standing around. I believe it was Sergeant Meyer told us to hurry up and get in there. We ran a little faster, thinking we had something to get in there. We hit the door, and as soon as we hit the front door, Sergeant Smith, I believe it was at the top of the steps, and told us to stop. Don't take another step.
So that was after you opened the front door?
I'm not even sure we got in the front door. We were right at the threshold. We didn't even break. I'm sure we even took a step in.
And he told you to stop?
He did.
And did he advise you as to why he wanted you to stop?
Yes, he said that it was we called it an active crime scene, and that there were shell casings on the floor in the upper floor there.
When you hear that, what does that cause you to do as you enter the premise?
We've been trained to keep a close eye on crime scenes, not to disturb the scene. It's been drilled into us since day one. So we were very cognizant of, that there were things on the ground not to step on or kick or whatever.
Did you then enter the residence?
We did. We came to the top of the steps, and we were being very careful not to drag anything. I believe Tharp had the monitor and Weber had the bag, and we kept them tight to our bodies so we weren't dragging them or anything like that.
Were you careful as to where you stepped?
Yes, absolutely. We basically tiptoed around the room until we got to where the victim was at.
When you got to the top of the steps, where did you observe the victim?
He was laying to the left, probably a couple, maybe.
Do you recall the position he was laying in?
He was laying supine on his back.
Okay. And do you approach the victim?
Yes, we did.
What happens as you approach the victim?
There were casings on the floor. We were very, very careful not to step on anything that was already on the ground. I believe I positioned myself towards the head. I believe Chad was in the middle, and I believe Tharp was in the middle, and Weber was at the foot. We went ahead and connected the monitor at that point, and we placed the electrodes on his body. But at that time, we determined the wounds or the injuries at that point.
Now, when you connect the monitor, you said,
Yeah, I believe
you
so.
recall, was he on the left side or the right side?
I believe we were all on the same side, from what I remember.
Which side would that have been?
That would have been on the victim's right-hand side.
Okay, so the victim's laying supine like down.
Can you approach?
You can. Here, go on the other side. It's all right.
You indicated that Mr. McKernan was laying supine on the ground. Do you recall whether his arms, what position his arms were in?
I believe they were right at his side.
And you went to the left, what would be your left, but his right.
That's correct, yes.
Did you check for a pulse?
I believe I did, yes.
Where would you have done that?
I usually check in the crowd.
The monitors hooked up
I
by whom?
believe Chad did that, Chad Tharp.
Was there any indication of life within Mr. McKernan?
No, there was not.
When you get no indication of life, what do you do as firefighters?
We documented the injuries that we've seen in our report. Got basic information from the policemen that were on scene. They generally do the calling of the coroner at that point, and then we went ahead and left.
Now, other than touching Mr. McKernan's carotid, did you guys, when placing the monitors, did you move the body in any fashion?
No, we did not. He moved the shirt enough to put the electrodes on his body, but other than moving the shirt, we did not roll him or nothing like that.
In fact, when you leave those electrodes on the body, do you
I
not?
believe we did, yes.
When you exited the premises, did you exercise the same caution as you did when entering?
Absolutely. We just as careful as we came in as careful as we came out.
Have one moment, Your Honor.
You may.
No further question.
Mr. Hiltner?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Captain Knapp.
Hello?
My name is Max Hiltner, and if you have any questions about any of the questions that I ask you, just let me know, okay? Is that a yes? I'm sorry.
Sure. Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. Now, you said you've been an EMT firefighter for about 12 years, is that right?
Yes, with the city of Massillon.
Okay. Now, when you were notified to go to this scene at approximately 11:11, does that sound about right?
That's correct. It was closing in on New Year's Eve, yeah. It was near midnight.
And then you arrived approximately 10 minutes later?
I don't believe it took us that long.
Okay.
From our station, I would estimate 6 on a guess. I don't think it would take us 10 minutes to get on scene from there.
Okay. And when you arrived on scene, you said there were other officers there, right?
There's multiple police officers, yes.
Okay. And multiple police vehicles, right?
Yeah, there was at least 3 or 4 that I can remember for sure.
Right, because you said you couldn't pull
Yeah, we could not get to the front of the house. We were at least 3 or 4 houses down.
Okay. Now, you know when you get to an active crime scene, as you called it, that you have to be cognizant of the evidence, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, now when you got to the house, how many officers were inside prior to you?
I believe there were 2 when we came upstairs. There was Sergeant Smith at the top of the steps, who's the one that told us to slow down, and then I believe there was another officer, and I don't recall who it was, but he was he would have been in the back. I believe that was the kitchen. I think there was only 2 that I recall that were inside when I got inside.
Mr. Hiltner, I'm just going to ask you to not turn your back to her again. Either stand back further or fix it that way. Thank you.
No problem. Would it jog your memory if do you know if Officer Antonides was there?
I Sounds about right. I'd imagine he was there. I don't remember specifically. The only two I would definitely remember talking to were Sergeant Meyer and Sergeant Smith, Kenny Smith.
Okay, and those two were definitely in the house prior to you?
No, Sergeant Meyer was outside when we approached.
Okay.
He was out in the yard, and he told us to hurry up. When we got to the door, and that's when Sergeant Smith was already inside and told us to stop.
Okay, and I guess my question is then, can you say for certain how many officers were in the house prior to you?
I'd have no idea.
Okay. Could it be more than 5?
I have no idea. I have no idea how many officers were on scene before I got on scene.
Now, when you arrived on scene, did you administer, or were you aware that there was an attempt to administer CPR?
I believe that might have been in the dispatch notes. I don't recall.
Okay. And you are familiar with the process of CPR, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. You probably administer it a lot, right?
Yes.
Okay. So CPR involves getting up next to a body, right?
Yes.
And actually physically getting on top of it?
To the side of it, yes.
Okay, and next to it?
Yeah.
Okay. And so is your understanding that Colleen had administered CPR prior, right?
Objection.
Overruled if it was his understanding. I mean, ask him the question.
I'm sorry, repeat.
You said it was your understanding that in the dispatch, there was information that someone had attempted to revive.
Yeah, I believe we heard that there was CPR attempted at some point.
Okay. Okay. So then with respect to the, and you weren't there when that prior CPR was administered, right?
No, there was no CPR being administered when I approached the body.
Okay. So you can't say for certain that anyone who administered CPR didn't accidentally disturb any of those shell casings, right?
I couldn't say.
Okay. And you couldn't tell the jury either that none of those officers that were there before you accidentally disturbed the shell casings, right?
Objection.
Overruled.
I couldn't say that either. I wouldn't know.
And other than the fact that there was a shooting, you also can't say what took place in the house that night, right?
No, we couldn't.
Thank you, Your Honor. Further questions?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right. You may step down, Captain. Thank you. Call your next witness.
Sergeant Desmond.
Further statements? Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear to testify the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Afternoon, officer.
Good afternoon.
Can you please give us your full name and spell your last name for us?
Sean Dadisman, last name spelled D-A-D-I-S-M-A-N,
And where are you employed, sir?
the Massillon Police Department.
And how long have you been a police officer with Massillon?
Massillon, 8 years,
And how long have you been a police officer throughout your career?
10 years.
Going to bring you back to December 31st of 2014. Were you working at the Massillon Police Department at that time?
I was
And what was your position at the Massillon Police Department at that time?
patrolman.
And as a patrol officer, could you please describe some of your duties and responsibilities?
General duties would be calls of service to the public, following up on any type of investigation that we may have due to those calls as a first responder, and just in general helping the public.
Now, what shift were you working back on December 31st, 2014?
I was on afternoon shift that day.
All right, and in the Massillon Police Department, what does the afternoon shift entail time-wise?
2 p.m. to 10 p.m.
And do you recall responding or being called to respond with regards to a call that came in on that evening to a 1753 Oak Trail, Northeast in Massillon, Stark County, Ohio, at approximately 11:10 a.m.? p.m.
I was not. My shift had concluded, and I was already home and was called back out.
All right. So your shift ended at 10 o'clock. You went home.
Correct.
You got a phone call.
Correct.
What time?
That phone call would have been approximately sometime shortly after 11 p.m.
Okay. And do you recall who called you?
Detective Golke.
And upon Detective Golke contacting you, where did you first go to assist?
I arrived at the Massillon Police Department.
And what was your primary purpose that particular evening?
That evening, I was to assist him with obtaining a search warrant and then evidence collection at the scene.
And when you say him, you're referring to Detective Golke?
That's correct.
All right. And so was Detective Golke the primary officer investigating this particular matter?
Yes, he was.
And were you a detective at that time?
I was assigned to assist with the Detective Bureau for a few weeks due to the heavy call load investigative work that was needed to be done.
All right. Now, prior to going to the scene at Oak Trail, you had mentioned something about a search warrant.
Correct.
When was that search warrant received?
That was completed by Patrolman Golke shortly before we arrived at the home. And that was also signed by Honorable Judge Elam just before 0100 hours.
And 0100 hours meaning 1 o'clock in the morning?
Yes.
Okay, so that would have been approximately 1 o'clock in the morning, January 1st, 2015.
Correct.
Okay. And search warrant, is that standard procedure?
Yes.
Okay. Now, prior to arrival at Oak Trail, were you aware of the general facts surrounding what may have happened at that location?
I was advised by officers what had occurred.
Okay. And what was the first thing you did when you arrived at the Oak Trail address?
Upon arriving, we made contact with the officers that were standing by the perimeter, and then we spoke to them briefly before going in.
All right, let me ask you this. When you arrive at the scene, approximately how long after the initial call in this particular case would you say you and Detective Golke arrived at the residence?
I don't have an exact time. I would say approximately an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes. Perhaps.
Okay. And do you recall which officers were present at the scene when you arrived?
Patrolman Leon, Patrolman Antonis, and Patrolman Anderson.
And do you recall where those officers were when you arrived?
Patrolman Leon and Antonis were outside in the front of the residence, and Patrolman Anderson was located inside. He was photographing evidence.
Okay. Now, upon first entering the residence, can you please describe what you first encounter?
Initially, when you walk into a set of steps that either go up or down. It's a split level design on the home. So it was four or five steps maybe that walked up, which then walked straight into a kitchen area. If you turn left, when you walk up the steps, it would have been a seating area or living room. And if you turn right, you walk towards the bedrooms.
All right. Now, when you first enter the residence, you've already indicated that your primary purpose was to assist Detective Golke.
Right.
However, upon entering, what are you specifically looking for?
In general, we examine everything that we see. We were advised that there were several shots, so we're looking for shell casings, bullet markings in the walls, any type of disturbance that might be in that general area throughout the house.
Let me ask you this, officer. When you entered the residence, had you been advised as to whether or not there may be a claim of self-defense?
No, I was not advised of that.
Okay. All right. So you walk into the residence. On a landing, do you note anything of importance or anything that you document?
Just in general, throughout the house, the landing, there was nothing disturbed. When we made it up to the top of the floor, there was a baby gate / dog gate that was still standing, which was in close proximity to where he was laying. There was a shelf that was right there that was undisturbed, nothing knocked down, nothing knocked off the walls, and no pictures or anything like that.
And during your time at the residence, did you go into all of the rooms of the residence, if you recall?
I did.
Okay. And other than the living area hallway that you've already talked about, was there anything in any of these other rooms that you noted that may indicate a struggle or any kind of altercation had occurred?
There was not.
Now, during the time that you walked through the residence, did you find any type of blood spatter on the wall, the floor, the ceiling?
Nothing other than close proximity to the body.
Did you notice any blood drops or any pooling of blood in any other areas of the residence?
There was not.
Did you determine whether or not there was any types of marks on the wall, whether it be from a scrape or any items that may have bounced off of it?
There was no markings that stood out.
Now, officer, you had indicated shell casings, correct?
Correct.
Could you describe in generality how these shell casings were laid out upon you entering the residence? Where were they located? And
upon entering the home, there was several that were noticeable as soon as you made it to the top of the stairs. That was the hallway and then the open area that led into the kitchen and into the living room. There ended up being one that was not visible to officers until the body was moved. It was near the left hip of the subject, and then there was 3 that was scattered throughout the dining room / living room, where the threshold would be, one being under the table, one being close proximity to the body, and then one being closer to the wall in the kitchen.
And
the dining room.
okay. And officer, with regards to the hallway itself, how far down the hallway did you find shell casings, approximately?
Just approximately, just a few feet from the body.
And can you give us a general idea of which room they were closest to down that hallway?
It would have been what was told to us as their master bedroom. If you turn out of their master bedroom and turn towards the living room, they were a few feet from that door. And also then would also correlate a few feet from the kitchen entrance.
Okay. Now, officer, it's also my understanding that in addition to officers from the Massillon Police Department, there was another individual who arrived as well who was there for another purpose, correct?
Yes.
And who was that?
Harry Campbell with the coroner's office.
And when in relation to your arrival did Mr. Campbell arrive on scene, if you recall?
I don't recall if it was before or after my arrival with Detective Golke.
Now, officer, with regards to his arrival time, did you begin to collect and document evidence prior to Mr. Campbell's arrival, if you recall?
No evidence was collected prior to his arrival.
So, Mr. Campbell was present the entire time during the collection?
Correct.
Okay. Now, when documenting and collecting evidence from a crime scene, along with Detective Golke and Mr. Campbell, what overall procedure did you follow to document what was being seen and what you were going to collect?
Detective Golke was working on a sketch of the scene. In general, I began filling out the forms for collection along with the evidence containers. Those items were labeled by number and then collected by number.
And officer, before any items were picked up, were they documented in any other way?
There was photographs taken.
Okay, and I believe you had indicated that a patrolman Campbell, is that correct?
Patrolman Anderson.
Anderson, I
Yes.
apologize. All right, he was present. Did you
Correct.
observe him taking photographs?
Yes.
Do you know if any other individuals were taking photographs?
Coroner Harry Campbell had taken several photographs as well.
And I'm going to show you first what I previously marked as State's Exhibit 15. Officer, you had referred to the sketch drawn by Detective Golke.
Correct.
All right, can you look at State's Exhibit 15 and tell us what that appears to be?
This sketch is a general layout of the residence, the upstairs floor, and where the evidence was located along with the rooms, where the individual was left lying and the firearm.
And is this the sketch that you were referring to?
That's correct.
And approximately what period of time was this sketch created during the collection of evidence and preservation of the crime scene?
That sketch would have been started shortly after we had arrived.
All right. Would that have been generally completed prior to the moving or collection of any objects?
That was completed prior to anything being moved.
Anything being moved. Okay. And you also referred to photographs, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibits 3A through 3YY. Officer, if you could just briefly browse this pile of photographs, and I will have some questions for you. Officer, do you, in looking briefly through those photos, do you recognize what State's Exhibits 3A through 3YY contain?
Yes.
And what do they appear to be?
It shows the upstairs, the evidence that was left behind, the subject lying in the living room, and the general layout of the area in regards to the photographs.
And officer, do those photographs generally show and depict a fair and accurate picture of the items and their location as you saw it when you arrived on December 31st, 2014?
Yes, they do.
And officer, I believe you had indicated that there were two people taking photographs, correct?
Correct.
And in some of those photographs, there are some numbers by some items in some pictures and other pictures in which there are no numbers by those items. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could you explain to the jury why there's some photographs with a number by a particular item and why there are other photographs prior to the numbers being placed?
Prior to the numbers being placed, there were some photographs that were taken, several photographs actually by Patrolman Anderson. once we were done examining the crime scene, that's when Patrolman or Detective Golke and Harry Campbell and I began to number and then photograph again.
Dad, are you going to need the DocuCam?
Not right now, Your Honor. Thank you, though.
Set up.
Okay, thank you. All right, officer, so am I correct in the order that items were first observed, then photographed,
Yes.
then marked?
Yes.
Okay, and that's with the numbers we talked about?
Correct.
All right, and after they were marked, photographed again?
Yes.
All right, were any measurements taken?
I did not personally take measurements. I believe Harry Campbell took the measurements.
Okay, and after the items were photographed, marked, and photographed again, is that when the collection process would have begun?
That is correct.
All right. And officer, I believe you testified that one of the first things you did was prepare envelopes?
That's correct.
All right. And what type of envelopes are we talking about?
We have our general evidence collection envelopes that we have at the police department that we use for crime scenes.
And officer, when you, Detective Golke, and Harry Campbell were involved in the collection and gathering of evidence, were you wearing anything in particular to help preserve the evidence?
I just had protective gloves on.
Okay, and what do you mean by protective gloves?
A latex glove that covered my hands.
Okay, and did you observe whether or not Detective Golke or Harry Campbell were wearing those same gloves?
They did as well.
Okay. Now, officer, in looking through State's Exhibits 3A through 3YY, there appears that there are a few rooms in the house that were not photographed. Is that correct?
Correct.
And do you recall which rooms had not been photographed?
The basement areas, the kitchen, the bedrooms. There were a couple bedrooms, the bathroom.
Okay. And officer, you had indicated that you were through this entire house during this evidence collection process, correct?
Yes.
Were there any items that you or Detective Golke needed to be documented in photographic form?
Two in the rounds that were collected from the garage. Other than that, there was no, with the knowledge that we had, there was no items that appeared to be of any evidentiary value at the time.
All right. You referred to first the gun case, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall where that had been found?
That was in the master bedroom bathroom on a shelf.
Okay. And I believe you indicated that was photographed?
I can't answer that.
Okay. If I would, let's see. If I can find it here. All right. Now let's see what color it turns on. Oh, it's white. Good. All right, officer, I'm first going to show you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 3WW. And what does that appear to be a photograph of?
That's the case on the top left shelf.
All right, and you indicated what room was that located in?
That's the master bedroom bathroom.
Okay. And you had also indicated a gun case, I believe?
Yes.
All right, show you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 3XX. What does that appear to be a photograph of?
That's the case that's open with a loaded magazine.
Okay. And was that the same case in an open position that we had previously seen in 3WW?
Yes.
Okay. And were those the only two photographs taken in the master bathroom and a master bedroom area?
Yes.
Okay. And I believe the other item that you said was of note outside of the primary living area was something in the basement, garage?
Yes. Was the Hornaday rounds, ammunition rounds.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 3YY. And officer, what is that a picture of?
That's the Hornaday ammunition rounds.
Okay. And I believe you said those were located downstairs in the garage basement area, correct?
Yes.
And sir, do those 3 pictures fairly and accurately depict the location of those items as they were found in the residence on the early morning hours of January 1st, 2015?
Yes.
Okay. Now, sir, since we had indicated that it looks like photographs were taken at 2 different times during this process, other than the markers, which we see in some of these photographs, I will find an example. I'm going to show you, for example, marked States Exhibit 3L. Can you please point out to the jury what markers you are referring to when you describe them?
Those are 2 spent casings, number 5 and number 6.
Okay, and if you can circle the numbers that you're referring to on here so we can see them. Okay, so when you're referring to placing down markers prior to photographing again, that's what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, just want to clarify that. Thank you. Now, other than the placement of some markers to identify specific items, as we just saw in States Exhibit 3L, were there any alterations, movements, or deletions made to any of these areas or any of these pictures prior to these items being documented?
Not why Detective Goki and Harry Campbell were in the room.
Okay, and were any of them posed in any way?
No.
Officer, I'm now going to show you what's been previously marked as States Exhibit 4. Officer, if you could look at States Exhibit 4 and tell me what that package appears to be.
This is a package containing the spent rounds, shell casings.
And officer, how do you know that?
This is my handwriting, and this was the evidence that I submitted.
And where did you first see these casings?
In the home, in the residence.
And are those the shell casings that you had indicated that you assisted in collecting?
Correct.
And my understanding is in States Exhibit 4 there are multiple other containers, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that a container that you put together yourself?
Correct.
Okay. And after you gathered the evidence, put them in these containers, what did you do with them?
Everything is collected. It stays within our possession. We then went back to the Madison Police Department when we were done with the crime scene, and everything was placed into keeping by Detective Goki, safekeeping, so it never left his chain of command.
Okay. And
custody.
okay. And after Detective Golke, are you aware of whether or not those items were sent for any type of testing, or would Detective Golke be in the best position to know that?
They were sent, multiple items were sent for testing as I was working down there with him a couple days after, and I went to BCI and I with him to drop off the evidence.
Okay, so in addition to collecting them and sealing them, you assisted Detective Golke in transporting them to BCI for further testing?
Correct.
And after they would have been submitted and tested by BCI, where would these items have gone?
At some point, Detective Golke would have gotten them back and they would have been placed back into evidence through his chain of custody. I didn't have involvement in that.
Okay. And officer, in looking at that particular container, does it indicate the time that these items would have been collected?
Approximately 200 hours.
Okay. And I believe you indicated this is your handwriting.
It is, correct.
And that is a container that you would have created on that particular night for this particular case?
Correct.
And in the collection of these particular items, do you recall whether or not it was yourself who physically picked up the item to put into the container, or did some other individual do it?
I remember picking up the majority of the evidence as we kind of assisted each other. But I do remember picking up the majority of the evidence because I remember opening the bags.
And officer, was essentially the collection of evidence an effort that everybody did together?
We were collectively cleaning up the scene at that point.
Okay. Was there any point in time where any evidence had been collected and put into a container that you were not present to observe?
No, I was present the entire time.
Okay. Now, officer, we're going to go through the 10 envelopes in there. I believe they are previously marked States Exhibits 4A through 4J. And we're going to go through them in groupings.
Okay.
We're first going to look at States Exhibits 4A through 4D, as in dog. And if you could look at those 4 exhibits, we'll go through them one at a time. States Exhibit 4A, do you recognize that exhibit?
Yes.
And what is that?
It is one spent shell casing, 9mm.
And whose writing is on the envelope?
Mine?
Was that an item that you collected?
It is.
And how did that item come into your possession?
By processing the crime scene that evening.
And is it documented on that particular item where that item was located?
Yes.
And how did you document where that item was located?
By location in reference to the layout of the home.
Okay. And on that particular exhibit, States Exhibit 4A, what did you document?
This would be the southeast hallway leading to the living room.
Okay. And when you say leading to the living room, which direction are you in the hallway? Are you facing the living room?
If you're facing the living room, you'd be heading in a northwest direction.
Okay. So you were back by where the
By
bathroom,
the master bedroom.
looking into the main area.
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure we have our directions correct. All
And
right.
that direction would stay the same then as we walk forward.
Okay. And sir, after you collected that particular casing, what happened to it?
It was placed into the evidence container.
And that actually went into the container of States Exhibit 4, correct? The larger container?
Correct.
Okay. And fair to say that larger container, States Exhibit 4, they were all sent to BCI?
I can't answer that. I don't recall if all of them went or certain
Okay.
ones.
Okay. To the best of your knowledge, after collection, it went into evidence with Detective Golke?
Correct.
Okay. Now, sir, if you could look at that casing, States Exhibit 4A, and tell me whether or not it appears to be in substantially the same condition as when you first saw and collected it.
Yes.
All right. Going to move to States Exhibit 4B, as in boy. If you could tell me what that envelope appears to be.
Another envelope containing one spent 9mm shell casing.
And how can you identify that particular item?
As a spent casing that was located at the residence.
And whose handwriting is on that envelope?
That's mine.
And did you collect that piece of evidence?
Yes, I did.
And did you document at what time that item was collected?
Approximately 200 hours.
And where was it collected?
That would also be the southeast hallway leading into the living room.
And after collecting that particular item, what did you do with it?
It was placed into the larger envelope with the rest of the evidence.
Okay, and would that have gone with Detective Golke?
It technically went with both of us back to the Madison Police Department.
Okay. And officer, if you could look at that particular item and tell me whether or not it is in the substantially same condition as when you first observed it when collected.
Yes.
I'm going to move now to States Exhibit 4C. If you could tell me what States Exhibit 4C appears to be.
This is an envelope that contains one spent 9mm shell casing.
And how can you identify that envelope?
This was located by me at the scene the night of the event.
And when was that item collected?
Approximately $200.
And where was it documented that that particular item was found?
This was also in the southeast hallway leading to the living room.
And when collected it, what did you do with it?
It was placed into the evidence container, and then after the scene was secured and we were finished, it went back to the Madison Police Department with Detective Golke and I.
And officer, if you could look at that casing and tell me whether or not it appears to be in substantially the same condition as when you first collected it that evening.
Yes, it is.
And State's Exhibit 4D, as in dog. If you could please identify that exhibit for me.
This is another envelope containing one spent shell casing, 9mm.
And how can you identify that particular item?
This item was collected by me at the scene.
And when was it marked?
It was marked at approximately $200.
And where was it found and located?
It was also located in the southeast hallway leading to the living room.
And after it was collected from that location, what happened to it?
It remained in Detective Golke and I's possession, where it was later transported to the Madison Police Department, placed in evidence.
Now, sir, I'm going to show you what I previously marked as State's Exhibit 3H. Try to zoom in a little bit. All right, officer, we have now gone through State's Exhibits 4A, 4B, 4C, and 4D. And looking at State's Exhibits 3H, we have here numbers, I believe, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is there a way that you documented which particular casings were found in what particular location beyond their specific descriptives?
That location and those numberings were based on collectively Detective Golke and Harry Campbell and I's perception of the exit from the bedroom and the motion walking towards the body that was laying in the living room.
Okay, so when we start with 1, in State's Exhibit 3H, that would be the casing that was closest to the master bedroom?
Correct.
Okay, and State's Exhibit 4A through 4D, are those casings documented in State's Exhibit 3H?
Yes.
Okay, and do those particular numbers, can you tell what number they line up to based on the evidence you have before you?
4A would be number 1.
Okay,
4B would be number 2. 4C would be number 3. And 4D would be number 4.
okay. And those, is that marked on your envelopes as well?
Yes.
Okay. Now we are going to move to State's Exhibits 4E through 4F. If you could first look at State's Exhibit 4E. And tell me what that appears to be.
This is one envelope containing one spent shell casing, 9mm.
And how can you identify that item?
This evidence was processed and collected by me.
And what time was that item collected?
Approximately $200.
And where was it collected?
This would have been the entrance to the kitchen from the hallway area.
And once it was collected, what happened with it?
It was placed into the evidence container, and it later went to the Madison Police Department with Detective Golke and I, where it was placed into evidence.
And sir, if you could open that item and tell me whether or not that casing is in substantially the same condition now as it was when you collected it on that evening.
It is.
Move to State's Exhibit 4F. Can you identify that item, please?
This is another envelope containing one spent 9mm shell casing.
And how can you identify that item?
This evidence was collected by me at the crime scene.
And sir, what time was it collected?
Approximately $200.
And where was it collected?
This was near the north entrance to the living room, which is also very close to the kitchen and also the hallway.
And after you collected that particular item, did you document the time that it was collected? I apologize if I already
It was
asked.
approximately $200.
Thank you. And what happened to it after you collected it?
It was taken into evidence by Detective Golke and I, taken to the Madison Police Department where it was held secure.
And officer, I'm going to show you what's been previously marked at State's Exhibit 3L. All right. Can you identify that photograph?
Those are the spent shell casings number 5 and number 6.
And spent shell casings number 5 and number 6, do they correspond to any of the exhibits in State's Exhibit 4?
Yes.
And which ones do they correspond to?
4E and 4F.
And which one's 4E?
4E would be number 5, and 4F would be number 6.
Okay. Now, officer, we have now looked at 2 separate photographs of casings, correct?
Yes.
The first grouping of photographs, we had 4 casings, correct?
Correct.
And it looks like in this particular grouping we have 2?
Correct.
All right. And I believe you mentioned that the next casings that you observed were more in the living dining room area. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Okay. And all of these, other than this one that seems to move to the kitchen a little bit, were all these items contained in what you would have described as the hallway?
Yes.
Okay. Now we're going to go to State's Exhibit 4G. And can you identify that item for me?
This is one evidence envelope containing one spent shell casing 9mm.
And how can you identify that item?
This item was collected by me at the crime scene.
And what time was it documented and collected?
Approximately 0200 hours.
And where was it found?
This was on the north side of the living room at the threshold of the dining room.
And officer, after that was collected by you, what happened to that particular item?
It was taken into possession by Detective Golke and myself. It was later taken to the Madison Police Department where it remained in evidence.
And officer, if you could look at that particular item and tell me whether or not it appears to be in substantially the same condition now as it was when you collected it that evening.
Yes, it is.
Sir, I'm now going to move you to State's Exhibit 4H. You could look at that item and tell me what that appears to be.
This is one evidence container containing one spent shell casing 9mm.
And sir, how can you identify that item?
This was evidence that was collected by me at the scene.
And what, when was it collected and marked?
Approximately 0200 hours.
And where was it found?
This was also on the north side of the living room, which also would be the threshold of the dining room.
And sir, what did you do with it once you collected it?
It was placed in the envelope, the evidence envelope. It was obtained by Detective Golke and myself, and later taken to the Madison Police Department where it was held in evidence.
And sir, if you can open that item and tell me whether or not that item appears to be in substantially the same condition now as it was when you collected it that evening.
Yes, it is.
All right, I'm going to now show you what I've marked as State's Exhibit 3T, as in Tom. The photograph's a little blurry, officer, so I apologize. Can you see the number in this particular picture, officer, without me zooming in?
I believe that is number 7.
Okay, so here, I'll zoom in and we'll see if we can confirm here. Maybe not, maybe not. Okay. Now, believing that it's Exhibit 7, would you be making, number 7, would that be based on the picture and its location as described on State's Exhibit 4?
Yes.
Okay. And so, item number 7 marked here in this photograph would correspond to which particular exhibit in
4G.
4G, okay. And now I'm going to show you what I've previously marked as State's Exhibit 3V, as in Victor. And officer, I'm looking at that particular photograph. Can you read the number in this particular photograph?
That's half of an 8.
Half of an 8, okay. And which exhibit is State's Exhibit 3V documenting in photographic form?
That should be 4H.
4H, okay. And officer, I believe you described them as both being in the dining room area? Our threshold of the dining room area?
Living room / threshold dining room, yeah.
Okay. And it looks like in both of these photographs, we can see what appear to be some legs.
Yes, that'd be the dining room table.
Okay. Now we're moving on to State's Exhibit 4I. You could tell me what that item appears to be.
This would be one evidence container containing one spent shell casing 9mm.
And sir, how can you identify that item?
This was evidence that was collected by me at the scene.
And when was it collected?
Approximately 200 hours.
And where was it found?
This was found in the northwest corner of the living room at the threshold of the dining room.
And sir, after that item was collected by you, what happened to it?
It was taken into possession. Detective Golke and I had taken it to the Madison Police Department where it remained in evidence.
And sir, if you could open that item and tell me whether or not that item appears to be in substantially the same condition as when you collected it that evening.
Yes, it does.
I'm going to now show you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 3X. Alright. Can you read the number on that particular photograph, officer?
Number 9.
Okay, I'll see if maybe zooming in helps a little bit. Not really.
I
Okay.
can see it.
Okay, you can see it. Okay. And officer, this particular photograph documents which casing in State's Exhibit 4?
That'd be 4I.
4I. Now we're going to move to State's Exhibit 4J. If you could please identify that item.
This would be one evidence envelope containing one spent 9mm shell casing.
And how can you identify that item?
This was collected by me at the scene.
And when was it collected?
Approximately 200 hours.
And where was it found?
This was lying under victim on north side of his body in the living room, just under the waistline.
All right. And officer, once that item was collected, what happened to that particular item?
It was obtained by Detective Golke and I. It was later transported to the Madison Police Department where it remained in evidence.
And sir, if you could open that envelope and tell me whether or not that casing remains in substantially the same condition as it was when you first collected it that evening.
Yes, it is.
I'm going to now show you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 3BB. And officer, if you can tell us what that photograph depicts.
That would be number 11.
All right. And why is that not a 10?
Because that wasn't located until after another item had been numbered because we were unaware that that was there.
Okay. So item 10, whatever item 10 was had been previously found, then this particular item was found.
Yes.
Okay. And the item marked 11, I know it's a little hard to see. I believe you indicated that's another shell casing.
Correct.
And the item marked 11 in State's Exhibit 3BB, which casing in Exhibit 4 does that correspond to?
4J.
And officer, that would be a total of 10 casings that were found in the early morning hours of January 1st, 2014. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And officer, during the collection of all these particular casings, were they documented in two different ways prior to them being collected?
I did an evidence form sheet that listed all the evidence that would be collected, and then I also completed the envelopes prior to the collection of that evidence.
Okay. And were gloves worn during the collection of all those items?
Yes, they were.
Ms. Day?
Yes.
I'm just going to ask you to, counsel, to approach, and you can come over on this side. It doesn't need to be on. Ladies and gentlemen, I was just conferring with counsel about scheduling because I am cognizant of the fact that it is now 4:30, and I did tell you that we would try to be mindful of this. I was just inquiring whether we only had a few minutes or whether there was going to be some significant time. There is going to be more time than I would like to give this afternoon to complete this officer's testimony. So, officer, you will need to return in the morning to complete your testimony. So, folks, that's what we will schedule in the morning. We will continue. We'll just literally pick up where we left off in the morning. I would ask that you be here again at 8:30, and I would provide to you the same admonitions as always. Please do not discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else. Do not allow anyone to discuss it while in your presence. Do not form or express an opinion on the case until it is finally submitted to you. And I will caution you again, ladies and gentlemen, do not attempt to investigate any further. Do not log on to the internet, anything about this case. You might be aware that there are some cameras in the courtroom, and I can assure you that there is some coverage of this. So you are going to need to be very vigilant about monitoring what you take in and what conversations you have. Once again, I can assure you that you are not appearing on any of the recordings or photographs. However, I do have concern that you do follow my admonitions in order to prevent yourselves from seeing or viewing or overhearing anything about the case that does not take place here, as we've mentioned numerous times. So please do follow the instructions. Please do have a pleasant evening, and we will see you back here at 8:30 in the morning down in the jury assembly room. Okay? Thank you. We are in recess.
On the chairs once again, please. Badges on your chairs for me.
So I'm just going to ask you to